Okay, go ahead, Ben.
Okay, so we were talking. Just a minute, I need to click the got it thing here. There we go. We were talking about Tzitzits, um, and the significance of Tzitzits being worn at the hip, the hip being symbolic of choices that we of our freedom to make choices. And the when we set the tzitzit is actually a boundary. It's a border. And so we're setting borders upon our choices. Now, this is why we wear the tzitzit, to remind us to set borders on our choices, to behave as Yeshua HaMashiach would behave. He always wore tzitzits. And in fact, it was because the woman at the well, or because the woman with the issue of blood touched his tzitzit, she was healed.
Right. Just like we're healed by keeping his commandments. And if you want a healing, the best way to prepare is start keeping his commandments, right?
Right.
So,
Because when you keep his commandments, you're healing your spirit.
mhm.
Healing is not just a physical thing. Our maladies are not just physical, they're
No.
also spiritual.
Yeah. And so here's another thing. So I forget the chapter in Genesis. We can go find it if we need to. But when Jacob was wrestling with the angel of Yahweh, which is Yahweh, right?
Mhm.
Or was it angel there? But anyways, it was Yahweh. I forget the actual title that was used there. Um, that was a sanctification event. And we can see that partly by his new name, aka new creature, right?
Yes, his new name, Israel, which means Prince of El.
Yeah, it has a couple meanings. That is one of them. But the thing that I want to bring out here is what happened to his hip. It was hindered, right?
Right.
Now,
It was dislocated. It was either dislocated or sprained.
right. And we can go look at the actual text, but I'm actually not too worried about the actual word, but the images there is it made it so he couldn't turn as much. Now, what happens when you're sanctified? You stay within the bounds of the law. His hip being hurt is symbolic, and it goes along with the imagery that he did not turn out of the way. He didn't make choices that took him off the path, off of the sanctification.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah. He finally decided that he wasn't smarter than Yahweh.
yeah, yeah,
Because that was a real problem with Jacob.
yeah. And to go along with that, hips, as Ben already mentioned, but I'll just reiterate it, hips are symbolic of choices. He stopped making so many wild choices. He didn't turn his hips as much after that event, right? Physically and spiritually, I will say.
He
That.
just had to, he just spent the rest of his life suffering the consequences of the choices he'd made previously.
Correct. And now, the one thing, when we're forgiven spiritually, that's the most important thing. But at times, and probably most of the times, there's still the physical consequences that we have to deal with our choices. Um, but it it will not have no once we've repented and he's accepted it, right? It won't have any bearing when it comes to the pearly gates up in heaven, right? As in final judgment. So, okay. Well, with that, unless someone's got a question on that, I'll pause. Oh, okay. Right. So we decided to do some reading from the Maccabees.
From the Apocrypha, the book of Maccabees.
Right. So the one thing just in general, and there's a D&C section on this that, and I forget, I probably go find it, but anyways, it basically brings out how there's good in the Maccabees, just you need to use some discernment, right? Because there's some problems in there also, and not just translation problems, but misunderstandings and misapplying problems also, right?
The basically the Apocrypha. It was not needful for Joseph Smith to do a inspired version of to include the Apocrypha in his inspired version because it's not completely the mind and will of God.
Right. Some of the authors kind of took liberties and they weren't as.
Of course, you could say that the Bible is not completely the Word of God because Song of Solomon was a liberty um, taken by I would say by wicked rabbis.
Yes, I also, and Joseph Smith brought that out himself. I would personally add Esther to that also. Um, and Joseph Smith did no corrections in Esther, which could suggest he didn't even get to it or read it because he went back and forth between the Old Testament and the New Testament, right? But anyways, um, but I see
It
enough
also
problems with
indicate
Esther.
it could also indicate the same thing as with the Apocrypha.
Sure, it could indicate that. Um, I just see there's a lot of correlations in Esther with paganism. I
No,
personally throw it out.
it's not just correlation. They're basically making the practices of they're basically baptizing pagan practices, which is
Yes, it's yeah. Anyways,
something.
so I did find the section on the D&C for the Apocrypha. Maybe we just read that just real quick before we start.
Okay, yes, let's have
So
some.
let me just change
Just
screens.
this is just a for your understanding as we go in.
Yeah. So we're okay, here it is. It's DNC 91, LDS, RLDS 88, 1835, 92, and 1844, 93, and it was given in 1833, March 9th. So let's see. Kesley, you want to read those for us?
Yeah. Okay. Verily I say unto you that it is not needful that the Apocrypha should be translated, and whoso receiveth not by the Spirit cannot be benefited. Therefore it is not needful that it, the Apocrypha, should be translated. Amen.
So there's good and bad in it. And we could go look at the whole section if you guys want, but those
So basically what he's saying is reader beware, not all of this was of the Spirit.
correct. Yeah, I think that's a good summary. All right. Well, with that, we can just go start reading through it. I will be completely honest. I'm not an expert here. I do think there's good in it, if nothing else, for culture and history. And I do believe one of the abominations of desolations that the book of Daniel talks about is in the book of Maccabees.
It's in
And
one of the
also,
Maccabees. There's
oh,
multiple books of the Maccabees.
yes. And possibly why Zach wants to read it, there are people who like to read it during Hanukkah because of some things that are claimed with it, which actually don't
Which
have
we could-
support, but anyways.
which we can go into should we find it.
You're right. So let me pause for a minute. Okay, well, Zach, since this was your idea, you want to start us out with verse 1?
Okay.
Oh, should I make it bigger?
I think you could possibly make it bigger.
Is that good, or should I try more?
That's pretty good.
Okay.
And it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip the Macedonian, came out of the land of Chittim, had smitten Darius, king of Persians and Medes, that he reigned in his stead, the first over Greece.
Okay, this is actually in relation to one of the prophecies in Daniel.
Do you happen to know which one off the top of your head? We can just review that real quick.
The actual chapter, I'm not quite sure, but it's talking about the ram and the let's go.
Let's pause for a second. Let's go find it.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the values of reading the Apocrypha, reading books like Maccabees, like the books of the Maccabees, is that you can see in them either fulfillment or shadow fulfillment of prophecy that has already been given. That this is one of these cases where this record correlates very strongly with this prophecy from Daniel, which is talking about the passage of kingdoms and time. And it's okay. So we're going to start, and we're going to start with verse 1. Okay, and I'm good. Charles, do you want to read verse 1 for us?
Yes, I can read. In the third year of the reign of the king
Belshazzar.
Okay.
Yep.
A vision a vision appeared unto me, even to me, Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the, I'm not seeing this.
Okay, you're having a hard time seeing it?
Here, let me make it a little bigger.
Yes.
Is that better?
I don't know. The last word, I'm not seeing it.
Okay, after which appeared unto me at the. Okay, after that which
appeared unto me at the.
Appeared unto me at the first.
Yes, at the first.
Okay.
Okay, so this
Yes.
is so basically Daniel has another vision after the first, which was of the 5 kingdoms.
Yeah, it is good.
Yeah, so the first one, just so people are aware, is Daniel 2, where he interpreted the dream, saw and interpreted the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had, correct?
Yes.
Which is, has been stated, 5 kingdoms, not 4. Okay, I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, Zach, do you want to read verse 2?
And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass, when I saw that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in a vision that I was by the river of Ulai.
Okay, so here he's telling you where he was when he received the vision.
Now,
Okay.
I would wonder, and this is just me speculating out loud, it's interesting that he was by a river. Okay.
Yeah, that is interesting, especially when you consider that rivers running water represents revelation.
Yeah, and then also, I mean, this is where we need more context. It can also be a dirty river, also, right? But that would just say where the revelation's coming from, right?
but it doesn't. He just simply states that he's by a river.
Right.
Christy, do you want to read verse 3?
Yes, I'm stopped to get gas right now, so I can. Okay.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot you were driving. My apologies.
Okay. Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram, which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher last.
Okay, so the ram is Persia.
Which goes along. In fact, let me just change the screen real quick so people can see it. Right there. Right.
Darius, king of the Persians and Medes. Okay, so
No, the Persian Medes merged together. Okay, that's why they're kind of bringing that up right there.
they merged together because Darius defeated the Medes.
Correct. Do you want to go back to Daniel?
Yeah, go back to Daniel.
Okay.
Because there's still more to be displayed of this
No,
prophecy.
that's fine. I just wanted to bring out that little part and show it. Right. So.
Yep. Okay. And Kelsey, do you want to read verse 4 for me?
You're muted, Kelsey.
I know, sorry. For some reason, it takes a lot of pushing for it to unmute. Okay. I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, but he did according to his will and became great.
Yes. So so the Persians, nobody could withstand him. Nobody could withstand him. I mean, they expanded westward, northward, to the south.
Yeah. Now, also, it's interesting. They didn't expound east, right? As is brought out in this revelation.
Right. And so, but the interesting thing is there was one until one nation did withstand them. And we have that in history as the Greeks.
Correct.
And so here we go into verse 5, and I'll read that. And as I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west, which would be Greece. Greece is west of Persia. Came from the west on the face of the whole earth and touched not the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. A notable horn between his eyes, that would be Alexander.
Yes. And the horn, just so people are aware, in imagery, has to do with power.
And ruler.
Yes.
A ruler, power, something like that.
Yes.
Okay. And okay, and verse 6, Stephen.
Yeah. And he came to the ram, aka Persia, that had 2 horns, aka Persia and the Medes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in flurry of his power. So the he here is the goat, right? Because he ran into him, but anyways, if you're
the horn that was directing the goat was Alexander, who was also known to be a man of a choleric temper.
right, and one thing I just to shamelessly plug, my Charlie and the Chocolate Factory kind of goes all over things that's in this chapter here. So
I should also like to point out that practically that in support of Daniel 9 being about the atonement and the cessation of the law of Moses, everything in Daniel 8 was fulfilled before Daniel 9.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Everything in Daniel 8 has already been fulfilled. So what we're seeing with Maccabees is the fulfillment of the unrolling of the fulfillment of Daniel 8. So, because much of the prophecies in Daniel have to do with events that have already passed.
Not all, but a lot of it. Yeah.
Not all, but most.
Yeah. Including Daniel 9, which a lot of false prophecy interpretations tries to claim it hasn't, right?
Yeah. And so this is okay. So that's okay. We just read verse 6, verse 7. Charles, can we go down a little?
Yes,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I
I'll
saw
go down. Oops. Is it big enough or do I need to make it bigger, Charles?
no, it is big enough. It is
Okay.
okay. And I saw him come close into ram and swam and break his two horns, and there was no power in the ram to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand.
Okay. So that's yeah. So this is talking about the conquering of Alexander of the Persian Empire. And actually, Alexander went on even into India.
Correct. But here it's kind of bringing out how much power he had upon doing that, right? He just
Right.
trampled on them. He just walked over them.
Right. Now, Zach, if you could read verse 8.
Therefore the he-goat waxed very great. And when he was strong, the great horn was broken. And for it came up four notable ones toward the four winds of heaven.
Yes. So Alexander died in the height of his power. Some say he was poisoned, some say it was a disease.
Right. And it was young too.
Yes, he was very
Vague
young.
memory tells me 30. Hopefully I'm remembering that right.
Yes. And his kingdom was divided between his four generals. Ptolemy took over Egypt. Antiochus took over basically the Middle East and the eastern part of the empire. Then you had two others who took over Greece and the northern part of Asia Minor.
Yeah.
So the kingdom was divided in four. See how very specific this prophecy is. See how we have the seen, acknowledged fulfillment of it.
Yeah.
Okay. And verse 9, Kelsey.
And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great, toward the south, and toward the east, and toward the pleasant land.
Yes.
So I do believe that this horn that came out is
this is the line of Antiochus.
right. He is one of the four generals that really pushed Greece all over the place, right?
Yeah. Yes, he was.
Yeah.
He was a deep persecutor of all things Hebrew. This is why, and toward the pleasant land, because he was ruling, his people were ruling over the pleasant land. Here's a little known fact. The family of Herod were not Jews. They were of his line.
Of this little horn here.
Yep.
Okay.
They were not Jews, though they.
So along with that, I don't know for sure, but I do tend to believe the pleasant land is Jerusalem, right?
Yes, that is That is how Daniel would look at it.
Right. Okay.
And let's see. Okay, and I guess it's my turn for verse 10. And it waxed great, even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them. So yeah, he's waxing big in his own head.
So just for those who are maybe not familiar with some of these old English terms, waxing is getting bigger, right?
Yeah.
And waning is getting smaller, but anyway.
Yeah. Yes, so he's getting big in his own head. He's getting big-headed. He believes himself to be capable of commanding the stars and commanding the host of heaven. And let's see, verse 11.
I can do that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, he magnified himself, aka the big head, right? Even to the prince of the hosts, as in he's, he thinks pretty highly of himself there, right? And by him the daily sacrifice was taken away. And we'll see this in Maccabees, that he did take away, made it so they were not allowed to do the daily sacrifice for a period of time.
And he desecrated the sanctuary.
Yes, which is about the major war, if not, and this is where I'm not the most familiar with Maccabees, but it is a significant war in the Maccabees is over this issue right here, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was restored also, right? And even Yeshua in the New Testament looks at this event right here that happened in Maccabees.
Yep.
Oh.
So, and the place of the sanctuary was cast down. So, Christy, do you want to read verse 12 for us since you're at home and are in a place to read?
Sure. And an host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered.
Because of transgression by the people, he was allowed to bring a cessation to the daily offerings of Moses.
Now, I do want to bring out how throughout the scriptures, and I think even more clearly in the Book of Mormon, it brings out if you want Yahweh's protection, we are to keep his commandments so that way he can protect us, right?
Right.
This brings out because of reason or because they sinned, aka not keeping Yahweh's commandments, they were not eligible for Yahweh's protection, which then allowed
Antiochus with his profane host to cast the truth down to the ground.
Correct.
And practice their profanities and their obscenities.
Yeah.
And to prosper.
So if you want Yahweh's protection, the answer is not a building. The answer is keeping his commandments.
So that's the section of the prophecy that we are reading about the fulfillment of right now in Maccabees. So let's go back to Maccabees.
Okay. All right. So I think that was all to help us understand verse 1. Right. And so that was very good background information that Ben helped us learn. So I'll read verse 2. And made many wars and won many strongholds and slew the kings of the earth. So
okay. Talking about Alexander.
Yeah. This is as it just right here, the Persians, and then the reigned in his stead first over Greece. So it's talking about Alexander right there. Let's see. Zach. Oh wait, no, you read one. Ben, you want to read verse 3?
And went through to the ends of the earth and took spoils of many nations, insomuch that the earth was quiet before him whereupon he was exalted, and his heart was lifted up. So this is once again, this is talking about Alexander. And we're still on Alexander here.
Right. So one thing, just make sure that people know spoils have to do with war. Okay.
Yes.
Spoils are the rewards of war, and it's basically the riches of the locations that you just conquered.
Right. And the proper way to tithe on spoils is just a straight 10%.
Correct. And we'll see that with Abraham. And that is a slight differentiation of your normal income, which is a tenth of the surplus. But
Right.
spoils are considered surplus, period. So that's why it's just a 10% period, because spoils are just surplus, period. Okay. Anyways.
Okay, so Alexander, it's pointing out here, Alexander began to be an arrogant shit.
That's a good way of putting it.
Shall we move on to verse 3 or to verse 4?
Yeah. You want to read that one?
Okay. And he gathered a mighty strong host and ruled over countries and nations and kings who became tributaries unto him. The Greek and Persian word for these tributaries is satrapes. That's basically people who owed tribute and soldiers to the king.
Which in today's term is taxes.
But that nominally were self-ruling.
To a certain extent, right?
Right.
As long as they stay within certain bounds and they paid their taxes.
As long as they made their payments, they could rule themselves.
To a certain extent, though. They didn't give them full leeway, but they gave a lot of leeway, right?
Yeah.
Christy, you want to read verse 5?
Yes. And after these things he fell sick and perceived that he should die.
And I would wonder if he fell sick goes kind of along with the theory that Ben brought out that he was possibly poisoned, right?
Yeah, there's actually multiple stories surrounding Alexander's death, and I would generally say that probably there's some truth in all of them.
Sure. And we got to kind of find out if someone's passionate about that, kind of figure out how all of them kind of fit together, right? But anyways.
Yes, exactly.
So, Kessler, you want to do verse 6?
Yep. Wherefore he called his servants, such as were honorable, and had been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom among them while he was yet alive.
Okay, so he found only 4 people and 4 of his servants who were honorable. That's fun.
Which goes along with what we read in Daniel 8, right?
Yep.
And those were 4 generals, right?
Yes. Yeah, when you're reading, because oftentimes, even in Kings, when you read about the generals, they're called servants. So yeah.
So,
The Kings and
one thing I do want to bring out, just as we're kind of going through this, it comes to my mind. A lot of people will claim that this and other prophecies from Daniel was written after the fact, but that's not the case. As Alexander the Great from Greece actually had Daniel's prophecies translated into Greek before they happened, or at least these
before
ones,
this one happened.
right? Because the Persia one had already happened, but the Greece one hadn't happened Not completely yet, right? Because Alexander caused it to be translated into Greek before he died,
Yeah,
right?
so
Oh.
anybody who says that these were written after the fact, they're expecting dumbed down people to not know their history, which is not such a terrible expectation anymore.
Yeah, sadly. I mean, I'm not a big history buff. I will be honest, a lot of the history I've worked on learning actually helps me understand prophecy, but
Well, that's the value of history, is that it helps us to understand prophecy.
that's my motivation for learning history anyways.
Well, I mean, that's one of the primary values of history, because the main lesson that we learn from history is that nobody learns from history.
Yeah, because
Um,
history repeats itself over and over again, right? So
Right. So like I said, the main lesson we learn from history is that nobody learns from history.
yeah, amen to that one. Because it's
So-
repeating right now. But anyways,
Right. So I think on to verse 7.
okay. Zach, you want to read that one?
So Alexander reigned 12 years and then died.
Okay. Let's go on. I think that doesn't really require a whole lot of explanation.
Yeah, no. Kessler, you want to do 8?
Mm-hmm. And his servants bear rule, everyone in his place.
So that's talking about the 4 servants, right?
Right. Everyone bear rule in the place that they had been given.
Right. Which we talked about in Daniel 8, just a little bit of, right? Charles, you want to are you there? He's still connecting. So let's get someone. I'll read verse 9. And after his death, they put crowns upon themselves. So this would be
That's
the
a really
Sorry,
That's a really interesting way to put it.
well, and it's very accurate though, because he didn't really if I
Didn't really make
remember
them
my
king.
little bit of history, he didn't really name a successor, right?
Right. Right. It's very accurate, but it's a very interesting way to put it. They all put crowns upon themselves. Which means that what this means is that the Israelites are not looking at any of these men as having been crowned by God. And we're about to find
right. And their previous ruler didn't really call them. They just kind of took it upon themselves, right?
Right. Yep.
So they did their sons after them many years, as in, which typical in most kingdom is the king gives it to his son, right?
Right.
And that happens for a while until the people get upset with the evils. Hence, and the evils were multiplied in the earth, right? Because sadly, as time goes on, men and women, because men includes both, forget how they got the riches they got and start getting lazy and wicked, right?
Right. Okay, and evils were multiplied in the earth. Why? These people were Greek pagans. That's why.
Right. And I think also they forgot the diligence that made it to get what they got in the first place, right? But in addition, they didn't really believe in Yahweh Elohim and his ways, right?
Yeah, they're Greek pagans.
Yeah. Zach, or no, Charles, are you there? If you can.
Yes, I'm there.
Okay. You want to read verse 10 for us?
I can read.
It's too small.
And there came out of them.
Okay.
And there came out of them a wicked root and
Antiochus.
Antiochus, yes,
Surnamed.
Epiphanes.
Epi.
Epiphanes.
Yes. Okay, son of Antiochus, the king who had been an hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the king of the Greeks.
So this is the son of so this is Antiochus Epiphanes, who is actually the son of Antiochus, who was the son of Antiochus. This is the third generation.
Okay.
And yeah, we're going to get into the Hanukkah reading here, I think. So
Okay.
this
Well,
is
I do know they like Hanukkah because of the war, and then and then what they like to claim as a miracle that actually there's no record of it, not even in the historians, right? But anyways, Christy, are you willing to read verse 11?
Yes. In those days went there out of Israel wicked men who persuaded many, saying, Let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us, for since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow.
Yep. This is typical of Judah.
Trying to make a deal if because they're struggling. Is that what I
Yeah,
Well, so in Torah, it actually spells out that you should not make a covenant with the wicked heathens, okay?
Yeah, but this is typical of Judah after the captivity. They were constantly giving away their birthright.
Right. Instead of returning to the law,
Well,
to get Yahweh's.
they would make a half-hearted attempt at returning to the law. And then when the persecution mounted, okay, we'll make a covenant with the Gentiles.
Yeah, and that happens pretty much everywhere. And a real famous one is in Jeremiah, where they did that, right, just before the destruction of Solomon's
Yeah.
temple.
Right.
Where Jeremiah told them before it was too late, repent and you won't have this problem, right? But then they didn't repent, and then they were told just to take their punishment, and then they didn't even want to do that. They just
No, they went that. Many of them went to Egypt, where they were slaughtered by the king of Babylon.
Yeah. You'd think after many of Jeremiah's prophecies came true, you might want to actually kind of take them kind of serious, but they didn't. So
Yeah, it's because they're really incredibly smart.
Yeah, I hence a sense of sarcasm in that statement, but anyways.
You
Now,
might be
I will say our current society has their own issues along those same lines, right? But
right. I mean, well, the facts of the matter are the entire Christian covenant is a covenant with the Gentiles.
yeah, and I'll just say this to not sidetrack us too much. I don't call myself a Christian. I am a Nazarene Mormon. But anyways.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we're on verse.
I simply classify myself as a follower of the way.
Sure. So 12. Ben, you want to read that one?
Yeah. So this device pleased them well.
As in the Jews.
Oh, yeah, we'll make a covenant with the Gentile. And we'll make a covenant with these heathen round about us. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah. The sad thing is, it's easier to see the strength of men than the strength of Yahweh, right?
Well, it's because they're right in front of you.
Yeah.
And oftentimes they're the ones who are swinging the swords and throwing the stones.
Sure. Where Elisha in the Tanakh, Old Testament, his servant was worried about all the hosts of men that were coming after them, and Elisha prayed that his servant's eyes would be open to see the hosts or the angels that were on the Jews' side to help them out, right? And he was amazed. We need to have our spiritual eyes to see things, right? So, anyways. Let's
Oh,
see.
wow. You can almost, this is almost like reading the first 12 verses of Daniel chapter 8. This is
Yeah, it's pretty much showing
really
the
sad.
fulfillment, right?
really sad.
Where you wanted to say something, Zach?
I was wondering if you could increase the text size.
Sure. I will attempt to. Wrong direction. Is that getting bigger? Is that better?
Yeah, it's better.
Okay. So I think we're on 13. Zach, are you willing to read that one?
Yep. And certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen.
So this is kind of showing they're doing something that is explicitly stated not to in Torah, to do things after how the pagans worship their false gods. And here they went off and did that, which leads into the fact that the abominations of desolations, right?
This is after they've rebuilt the second temple. This is after they've built the second temple.
Okay. Okay, so maybe I got my timing off a little bit
Yeah,
then.
the first temple was Solomon's temple. And so the second temple was the temple built by Nehemiah.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's right. That's right. But even though it's built, then they went into wickedness, and then they because of the wickedness, the abomination of desolation happened.
Right. And this is talking about the wickedness that they're entering into.
Right.
But at least what they're setting up is a place away from the temple to do these things.
Okay.
And that's what verse 14 is about.
Okay. Well, I'll read that one real quick. Whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen. So basically a false altar, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is like a gymnasium.
I don't believe
it's a place
so.
of exercise of worship.
Yeah. This is where
Not physical exercise.
no, in fact, I think verse 13 helps give us the idea or the context that is like false altars, because the ordinances of the heathens, ordinances have to do with religious ordinances, not going to the gym, right? In fact, whereupon is a connecting, saying this idea is connected to the previous sentence, right?
As does the colon instead of a semicolon.
Correct. But anyways, this exercise is connected to the ordinances. And both of them talking about the heathens, right? One's customs and one's ordinances. Those are just like in English, it's not it's frowned upon when you use the same word again really close to the other instance, right?
Besides, when it comes down to it, what does God have against exercise?
Yeah, it's good to exercise.
I don't think God has anything against exercise. What he does have again is the exercise of the ordinances of the heathen.
Right. As in, because we're not supposed to do anything in likeness of how the heathens or pagans worship their false gods. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think I brought up the gymnasium because I remember they did build one in Jerusalem somewhere.
Yes, they did. And yeah.
That has the gymnasium doesn't really have much to do with it has the gymnasium is not so much about it's not so much about heathen practices except that like the Greeks very much worshipped their own bodies.
Yeah, they did the
Yeah,
naked, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
they did.
They did their athletics naked. Yes.
Yeah, and that's why some of the Jews were embarrassed about being circumcised. Because why else would they be embarrassed about it unless it was naked,
Oh,
right?
and here we go. And made
How else
themselves
would you see it?
the very next verse, and made themselves uncircumcised and forsook the holy covenant, and joined themselves to the heathen, and were sold to do mischief.
Yeah. So, anyways, this is where they didn't do a commandment, and circumcision was a punishment that ended at the cross. And we can get that from multiple places, from Paul, from JC Genesis, Book of Mormon, and DNC, right?
But at the point of, while it was a punishment, at the point of this publication, or at the point that this was written, it was still a part of the covenant.
Yeah, it was still something they were supposed to be doing.
It was still a part of the covenant, because of the so that was to make themselves uncircumcised, to cease circumcision, and forsake to cease circumcision was basically to forsake the covenant. It really was on a certain level. If you're a Hebrew, definitely.
Well, this is where
Yeah.
I even see this today, where people want to claim they're of Yahweh, but they don't want to make it look like they are in the world, right? So they're not being witnesses
They-
unto
they-
Yeshua in all things.
They want to claim they are of Yahweh, but they want to claim that they can worship him any day they choose. They want to claim that they're of Yahweh, but they don't want to wear tzitzits. They want to claim, there's all kinds of people who, for one reason, they want to claim that they are of Yahweh, but they don't want to eat kosher.
Right. They basically want to claim it so that way they can get what they want, but they're ashamed of him and his ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
And thus they have not written upon their heart. They're just doing something to try to get something out of it rather than becoming or out of love, right? When you love your spouse, you stick up for your spouse when someone's talking negatively about your spouse. You don't go along with the negative speak. You stand up for your spouse. And Yahweh is coming back to get the bride, so that way we can become the spouse, right? So, anyways. Okay, so I'm sorry, I forget what verse we're on. I think
we
we
just
did
finished
15, right?
15. Yep.
Yeah. 16. Let's see. Kesley, you want to do that one?
Okay. Now, when the kingdom was established before Antiochus, he thought to reign over Egypt that he might have the dominion of 2 realms.
Okay, so he's too big for his own kingdom.
Yeah. Where this is where he's trying to encroach upon other people, right? And then this book is history, so and there's other history that kind of confirms that happened, right?
Yes, there is.
I'll read 17. Wherefore he entered into Egypt with a great multitude, with chariots and elephants and horsemen and great navy. Anyways, elephants has a lot to do with some of the wars, but also, oh, go ahead.
War elephants were the most feared weapon of any army, in that time, because they were basically walking. They were basically walking towers and battlements. Because archers could stand on a platform on the back of the elephant and fire into the enemy round about. The elephant itself would have a spiked band between its tusks which it could use to sweep enemies before it.
A good movie example is the third Lord of the Rings.
Right.
Is they
They're
beat the
using
crap
the
out of their
elephants
leader.
exactly the way that the Greeks and the Carthaginians and et cetera, would you have used them.
I think another thing to bring out is how the mystery religions rely on Greek in Egypt, and here is the greatest general after Alexandra going into Egypt and thus merging Egypt and Greek, right?
Right. Well, basically, they turned Egypt into a tributary province for a time.
Right, but there were also then the trading of the ideas back and forth also.
Well, yes, yes. Well, the fact that Ptolemy himself was a Greek who became king of Egypt.
Sure.
Last line of pharaohs for the Ptolemies.
You want read 19, Ben?
Thus they got okay.
Or did I skip one?
You skipped.
Sorry. So read 18. Sorry about that.
Made war against Ptolemy, king of Egypt, but Ptolemy was afraid of him and fled, and many were wounded. Many were wounded to death.
I think that's self-explanatory. Charles, you want to read 19?
Yes. Thus they got the strong cities in the land of Egypt, and he took the spoils therefore.
Okay.
Zach, you want to read 20?
And after that, Antiochus had smitten Egypt. He returned again in the 143rd year, and went up against Israel and Jerusalem with a great multitude.
Yeah. So we're seeing history. We're seeing the prophecy in Daniel 8 unfolding.
Yeah. Where they're going to, what was it? The Pleasant Land, right?
He's going against the pleasant land.
Yeah. Let's see. Kirsty, you want to read 20 or 20, right?
21.
Oh, 21. Sorry. Read 21, Kirsty.
And entered proudly into the sanctuary, and took away the golden altar, and the candlestick of light, and all the vessels thereof.
The
And
candlestick,
then, go ahead, Ben.
the candlestick of light represents the stars of the heavens that he throws down in Daniel 8.
So I also think, and this is where I'm kind of, because I haven't really studied this part of course, I haven't really studied Maccabees at all, but this is starting to lead into the abominations and desolations and taking away the, which was a requirement back then, the daily performance and ordinances that we know as Law of Moses, the 2 daily lambs, primarily, anyways, right?
But the facts of the matter are, given that Israel was already in full violation of the law, the performance of the daily ordinances of the law of Moses was a joke.
I would agree with that, but they were still doing it until it was taken away from them. As in Mosiah 13 brings out that they thought those ordinances would save them, right?
Right.
Where Abinadi was telling King Noah and his wicked priests that didn't do that, right? So
yeah, they don't. As it states in John chapter 1 verse 18, that law was administered to death.
yes, it was a carnal one, and that was done away at Yeshua's cross. But anyways, I do also wonder if the candlestick of light points to the menorah. So, let's see. Kesley, you want to read verse 22?
Okay. And the table of the shewbread, and the pouring vessels, and the vials, and the censers of gold, and the veil, and the crown, and the golden ornaments that were before the temple, all which he pulled off.
So this is talking about things in the holy place. So that's the place where the Aaronic priests went to on a regular basis. Not the Holy of Holies where the Ark of the Covenant was, right? Which to me gives a little more credence that the candlestick is the menorah, because that's the same location that the menorah is located, right? All right, so let's see. Zach, you want to read? We just did 22, so you want to do 23?
Yep. He took also the silver and the gold and the precious vessels. Also you took the hidden treasures which you found.
So inside the temple, there was a lot of silver and gold. Like the candlestick was out of gold, and many other things, a gold out of silver. And then on the side of the temple were the priests' quarters, I think. I may remember the names wrong, but where they stored things, such as this silver trumpets and things of that nature were called at other times also.
Yeah, so he utterly despoils the temple.
Yeah. So they basically just took everything, is kind of what it's bringing out. Or anything of value, right? Worldly value.
Anything that could be sold for anything that could be sold.
Yeah, for money. So let's see. Christy, you want to read 24?
And when he had taken all away, he went into his own land, having made a great massacre and spoken very proudly.
Yeah, so this general was not a nice guy here, right? He went around conquering and destroying things and was bragging about it. Of course, what humans don't go around bragging about the things that they do today, especially when such bragging makes it easier for them to keep doing it, right? I mean, even poker games, it's there's a big mind game in poker games, and if you can get in someone's head, it makes it easier for you to win them. So I think that's partly why he went around speaking very proudly. It's just so that way other countries would submit rather than fight against them to make it easier for himself, right? Let's see. Zach, you want to read 25?
Therefore there was great mourning in Israel in every place where they were.
So this kind of shows how he took over the whole country, right? Not just part of it, but all of it, and that he was causing wickedness everywhere. And including making it so they couldn't keep resemblance of Torah, because they weren't the best at keeping Torah here, okay? But there are specific things that they still did do, more as a token aspect, such as circumcision, right? That he was not allowing people to circumcise. As I think even later in the text, it brings that out specifically, if I remember correctly, right? But because of this, although Israel wasn't really trying to keep the law, they're mourning because even the little resemblance of the law that they somewhat kept, they couldn't keep now, as in even kosher laws, right? In fact, even later here, it brings out how he was forcing them to eat pig, if I remember correctly.
Right. Well, he was sacrificing pigs in the sanctuary.
Correct, which goes along with the abomination of desolation, right?
Yeah. Make The abomination that maketh desolate is actually
Okay, so I'm remembering the phrase a little wrong. You
Yeah.
want to read verse 26, Ben?
so that the princes and elders mourned, the virgins and young men were made feeble, and the beauty of women was changed. In other words, the light left them.
Yeah. And so I won't say who, but I will say, I recently met someone in person, who I've seen in videos, and I will say that their countenance has changed for the negative. Now, I do understand countenance is kind of a figurative or subjective thing, right? But for me, this guy's countenance has gone negative, which makes sense of who he used to follow and has continued on the false traditions he learned from that person. So, and I would say that's along the same lines there, right? Let's see, Zach, you want to read 27?
Every bridegroom took up lamentation. She that sat in the marriage chamber was in heaviness.
So I'm not exactly sure what this goes to. I have a thought, unless Ben knows exactly what it's going.
Well, there is the Israel was supposed to be the bride of it was supposed to be the bride to Yahweh. She was she that sat in the marriage chamber. And they were in heaviness. Also, of course, they're also going to assign that lamentation to Yahweh as well, because it makes them feel better about themselves. So we have here already some coloring, because the people who wrote this were also wicked.
Sure. So one thing that I wonder, in London, there was a period of time when the kings took the right of the marriage bed.
Prima nocte.
Oh, is that what it's called?
Yes. First night, the ruler could walk into any marriage and take the bride on the first night of her union with that
right. I wonder if that's referring to something like that, but this is where I don't actually know.
I do not believe that such a thing was happening at that time. I think but it is possible. I mean, even the Greeks have their own variations on those kinds of ideas. Prima nocte was a Roman concept.
Oh, it's Roman. I thought it was London. But anyways.
No, London, it had to come from somewhere, right?
Well, right. It's just who started it, but anyways.
Who conquered Britain?
Rome.
Yeah, Rome. It can't, the idea, we'll just say when the name of a practice is Latin, it came from Rome.
Oh no, that makes sense. I didn't remember the name of the practice. I just know the practice. So
yeah, the name of the practice was prima nocte, and that is a Latin a Latin name, comes from Rome.
So did Rome get it from Greece?
Regardless of what everybody wants to say, Rome did not borrow all of their spiritual, all of their spirituality from Greece.
Oh, okay, so you don't think that came from Greece?
It could. I think there were some ideas that were similar to that in Greece, but I don't know that they went that far.
Oh, okay, so maybe I'm seeing more in verse 27 than actually there. Then I don't know.
I all I can say is that I don't know that they actually went that far.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying. But it's possible that it could. It's possible that there's something like that could have been happening.
Okay.
So it's one of those things that could go either way. Because it is something that is connected to paganism and is also the proliferation of certain bloodlines, etc., etc.
Sure. And
We
another
don't
thing,
have to go any farther on that.
no,
Yeah.
sure. Oh, and then another thing it goes along with is a curse in Deuteronomy 28 and 29. That
Yes.
if you don't keep the law, someone will take your bride and be with her. Right.
Right. This is the word of the Lord being fulfilled.
Right. But they weren't keeping the law as Yahweh told them to. So that's another reason or justifications for possibly seeing that in verse 27 is the curses in Deuteronomy
Right.
27 and 28, right? Or is
Yeah.
it 28 and 29? Anyways, my memory's a little vague right now. Sorry.
28, 29. It's 28, 29.
28 and 29. But there is the curse in there, and it's probably in chapter 28 that if you don't keep the law, someone will take your wife and lay with her, right?
Right.
And they definitely were not keeping the law here. So it's not too much to stretch to think that curse was actually happening. So, anyways.
And it's interesting, verse 28 is interesting.
You want to read it since you're bringing it up?
Land also was moved for the inhabitants thereof, and all the house of Jacob was covered with confusion. The land also was moved. This is, again, another reference to the curses in Deuteronomy 28, 29.
Yeah, where they lost their land is basically what it's saying, right? So, let's see. Kesley, you want to read 29?
Sorry, I was muted. Okay, 29. Let's see. And after 2 years fully expired, the king sent his chief collector of tribute unto the cities of Judah, who came unto Jerusalem with a great multitude.
So I would say that the Greeks had a center in Jerusalem, right? That the Hebrews or Israel had to go give tribute unto, right? Or basically taxes in today's terms.
Yep. And here we go. And let's who's going to read verse 30?
Christy, are you willing to?
And spake peaceable words unto them, but all was deceit. For when they had given him credence, he fell suddenly upon the city and smote it very sore, and destroyed much people of Israel.
So the fact that they were lying about what's going on and saying they love them, even though they hate them, shows that they feared and they knew they couldn't overpower him because they had no strength of Yahweh with them.
No, the person spoke peaceable words unto Judah.
Oh, oops. Did I read that wrong then?
Yeah, the tax collector spoke peaceable words unto Judah, but all was deceit. For when Judah gave him credence, he fell upon the city and sacked it.
Oh, the tax collectors. Oh, okay.
The tax collector came with a great multitude, a big army.
Okay, so even though they paid their taxes, they still told the army to destroy them, right?
Yep.
Which is happening even today. So we'll just leave it at that, right? We're giving them what they want, but at the same time, they're destroying us.
Right.
Which actually kind of goes along with multiple fulfillments of prophecies. I'll just leave it at that, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Hence, as we talked about earlier, we're doomed to see history to keep repeating because people don't learn the lessons, right?
Yep.
Zach, you want to read 31?
And when he had taken the spoils of the city, he set it on fire, and pulled down the houses and walls thereof on every side.
So this is after the tax collector got what he wanted, he destroyed them, right?
Right. After he got everything that he could get out of the city, he then lights it on fire.
Right. And this kind of reminds me of I don't remember who said it, but someone said something along the lines that a tyrannist will set a city on fire or his country on fire just so that way he can rule it himself instead of somebody else, right?
Yep, a tyrant.
Yeah. And that because tyrants just want control. They don't actually want progress and health and prosperity for the people. Let's see. Kesley, you want to read 32? Kesley, are you there or are you falling asleep?
Okay.
You're muted.
Okay, I'm here. Sorry. I don't know what happened to I don't know what happened to my screen. I'm confused. There we go. I'm back up. Sorry.
Oh, okay. No, that's fine.
Okay. What number? 30?
32?
True.
Mhm.
Okay. But the women and children took they captive and possessed the cattle.
Okay. So when they took the women and children captive, they weren't just taking them captive to hold in a prisoner of war camp.
No, they
They
were,
were selling them as slaves.
yeah, and among other things. I'll just leave it at that. 33, Zach, you willing to read that one?
Then builded they the city of David with a great and strong wall, and with mighty towers, and made it a stronghold for them.
So I believe this is saying that the wicked people took over the city of David, right? And then
Yep.
made it stronger for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
34, I'll read. And they put therein a sinful nation, wicked men, and fortified themselves therein. I think that's kind of clear, right?
Yep. Yep, that
Um,
is.
Ben, you want to read 35?
They stored it also with armor and victuals. And when they had gathered together the spoils of Jerusalem, they laid them up there so they became a sore snare.
So they took everything that they stole from everybody and put it into the city of David, right?
Mm-hmm. And here I think they're actually talking about the actual section of the city now commonly referred to as the city of David. In other words, where the temple was.
Right. And I think 33 kind of bears that out, but the city of David was in Jerusalem, right?
Yeah, it was a part of Jerusalem.
Right. And this just kind of gets into an issue where sometimes, even in the New Testament, there's examples of this where they'll say the big city, or what maybe today we'll call the county, right? Where they really mean the city, right?
Right.
It's a common thing, even back then. So,
Right.
anyways, so 36, maybe I'll read. For it was a place to lie in wait against the sanctuary, aka the temple, has been brought out, and an evil adversity to Israel. So I think where even today there's this high sanctity feeling towards the temple, right? And so here they are. What's the word I want to say? They're defiling the temple, right?
So, and here's how they're defiling it.
Oh, okay. So let me just scroll up. And you want to read 37 as when I get it up to a nice spot right there.
Thus they shed innocent blood on every side of the sanctuary
and defiled it.
Yeah.
They found people who were keeping the law, and they killed them on every side of the sanctuary.
Yeah. Which killing of innocent blood is like sin number one almost, right? So
Yeah.
that's a pretty big deal. It's one thing to shed the blood of wicked men, right?
Right. It's
Quite another to do it of innocent blood, where
right. The first commandment is actually a commandment of thou shalt not murder or thou shalt not shed innocent blood. Or not the first commandment, the
I think you mean the fifth.
the fifth. Yeah, the
Yeah,
fifth.
well, it's the first one dealing with men, right?
Right. This or sixth commandment.
Oh yeah, the sixth. Sorry, yeah, you're right. The sixth. I gotta
Yeah,
do
thou
math.
shalt. It reads. It comes to us in the King James English as "thou shalt not kill," which is a bad translation because the Hebrew word means basically. It's
It means murder. There's a different
means-
word in Hebrew for kill, and there's a different word in Hebrew for murder.
it means murder with the connotation of the shedding of innocent blood.
Right. Which is what they did here. Now, even people today cringe at people killing people who had nothing to deal with the war or that had not done anything wrong, right? Where people can understand killing people who are evil or have done some bad things.
Well, here's the thing. People cringe at the thought. Most people who cringe at the thought have never been in a war themselves. Because when you're in the middle of a war, you don't know who's innocent, you don't know who's guilty. What you do know is that next person could be the person who could be that person who's smiling at you now could be the person who kills you.
Well, I think there's a place for both. But anyways.
No, I'm not saying that it's right to shed innocent blood, but I'm saying that war has a tendency to inure that cringe.
I can understand that, but I do think there are times where the soldiers know that they're going somewhere that is basically innocent blood, but they do it anyways because they're following orders. But
Right. And that's not, by the way, that's not a viable excuse according to Torah.
Oh, I completely agree. Just because your leader told you to do it doesn't justify you in the eyes of Yahweh when it comes to Judgment Day. As in Peter's words in the book of Acts, we should follow Yahweh over men, right?
Well, just like it, because, but this not only does it not absolve you in the eyes of Yahweh, but the reason why so many people from the military come back with post-traumatic stress disorder is because they followed orders.
Yes, and orders to the point where they did something that they knew was evil.
Yep.
And they feel bad about it.
Yep. And everybody has a different way of dealing with that.
Yeah. So maybe I'll sidetrack just a second. To go along to give some support for that from the scriptures. I have a few on this, but this one's I do think I have the right one. No, let's see. Oh, this one. So here, Moroni 10:22. And if you have no hope, you must be in despair, and despair cometh because of iniquity. Now, I've never had PTSD, but I would say that's despair from the things that I know about it and have heard about it. Okay. And according to Yahweh's word, it happens because of iniquity. Hence, they followed an order of something that they knew was wrong, sin, iniquity, right? So,
And some people, it hardens to the point where they are wicked, monstrous beasts, and some people, it just breaks.
yes. And I would suggest don't take a chance either way. Just
Don't
don't do it
join the
in the first place.
military.
Yeah. Even better, don't join the military.
Don't join the military. Because all the military is an organization. It's a bunch of jackboot thugs.
Yeah.
We destroy, as we were taught in Air Force basic training. We kill people and destroy things that threaten our way of life.
Yeah, and here's a big one. I'll read it. So, there's a lot of various verses in the scriptures about war, but here's one I definitely think relates to how at least the USA Army does things, which is wrong. And the quick summary is that we are only to defend our own land. So 3 Nephi 3:20 through I think 21. Now the people said unto Gideoni, pray unto Yahweh, and let us go upon the mountains and in the wilderness, that we may fall upon the robbers these were the bad guys, right? And destroy them in their own lands. But Gideon said, no. But Gideon saith unto them, Yahweh forbid. As in Torah says, don't do that. For if we should go up against them, Yahweh would deliver us into their hands. Therefore, we will prepare ourselves in the center of our lands. Hence, defend on our own land, and we shall gather in all our armies together, and we will not go against them. We will not do offense. We only do defense, but we will wait till they shall come against us, defense. Therefore, Yahweh liveth, and if we do this, he will deliver them into our hands. We are not to go out to protect ourselves of what we might think someone might do against us. We are only to defend. And defend on our own land.
Yes. Now the thing, when you consider that the United States is just the bully arm of the Fourth Kingdom,
Yeah.
that explains a great deal of what our military does.
Yep. And if you don't think we're Rome, go look at the Rome's mascot was an eagle. Rome's coins had eagle and their presidents on it, among other things. We are Rome, and we're following the same pattern. Don't kid yourself.
Yeah,
Rome.
Rome never really fell.
It just morphed and went other places, but it's.
I tried telling my bishop's wife that. She didn't like hearing that.
Well, of course not, because in the Restoration, there is a big tendency to worship the USA and the Constitution, right?
Yeah.
So there's a D&C section that Yahweh states that he suffered the Constitution, right? You don't suffer something that you want. You suffer something to happen when it'll serve your purposes, despite you not really liking it, right?
Yeah.
In fact, we could go look at those various sections real quick if you want. Let's see. I have I have notes on that. I have notes on a lot of stuff, don't I? Oops. It's this one. Okay, yeah, I do believe the USA is gonna fall, but that's not the one we want. But so here's DNC 10177. You want to read that one, Kesley, since you kind of brought it up?
Sure. According to the laws and constitution of the people, which I have suffered to be established and should be maintained for the rights and protection of all flesh, according to just and holy principles.
You want to read 80?
Yeah, and for this purpose have I established the constitution of this land by the hands of wise men. Wise men is not a good thing, whom I raised up unto this very purpose, and redeemed the land by the shedding of blood.
Now, here's an interesting thing with verse 77. He suffered the Constitution to be established, number one. And the reason was for law and order. Protection of all flesh. And we are to obey, the Constitution, the Constitution is to be maintained according to that which to just and holy principles.
Holy as in his principles, right?
Right.
Not principles of
The
men.
thing is there was a process by which we could have turned the Constitution into a good thing.
Or I used it for a good thing, I think is a better way of
Oh
saying.
yeah, there's a process by which we could have used it for a good thing, but we didn't.
No, in fact, the Constitution is being shredded as we speak, right?
Well, but
And it has been for a while.
yeah, but that's because we didn't use it to work a good thing.
So,
It could have served that purpose, but it didn't, because every amendment that we've made to it since has been to take from people their rights, their freedoms.
so I wouldn't say every amendment, but there are some amendments that go along those lines. So
Technically, even the one that freed the slaves actually didn't really free the slaves. It just extended them rights. It extended them privileges where the white people had rights.
sure. But if I remember right, the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, I would say that was a good one, and that when
That's a good one. The First Amendment is a good one.
yeah.
But every other amendment since then has been with the mindset to enslave humanity. It's enslave the American populace. By setting the precedent that some of our citizens only enjoyed privileges rather than rights. Therefore, when the New Deal came in with Social Security, nobody complained at all when all of our rights became privileges, because the precedent had already been set.
Right. And so I do believe in the millennium, we will be ruled by what is described in Mosiah 29, which is basically Torah. And I have a post that goes along with that. But also, I think in support of Mosiah 29 is DNC 105. Okay. DNC 105 brings out, and I'll just read it: the kingdoms of this world, and that's everywhere, not just the USA, right? But that includes the USA, may be constrained to acknowledge that the kingdom of Zion is the kingdom of Elohim, and even the Messiah. Therefore, let us, the world, become subject unto Zion's laws, which is Torah. Okay. And if the us did not include the USA where this revelation was given, why is it using us instead of theirs or they, right? This us includes the USA.
Yeah, well, the thing is, yeah, and so the point that I'm making is that really the Constitution was dead as of the signing into law of the New Deal.
Yeah, there's been a multiple problems throughout
There's not
history.
a single person on this Zoom call who knows what it was like when the Constitution was alive.
Oh, no, yeah. And even the I'm trying to remember, the monster of Jekyll Island has caused lots of problems also, right?
Yes.
Among other things. But not to sidetrack much on that stuff. But even D&C 134 pretty much equates the other governments around the world as in the same category as the USA Constitution, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if we want to sidetracking that much more because we are trying to do Maccabees, but if you read that, it brings out human law a lot and then divine laws and how they're different. And the Constitution is even brought out how it was, done by the hands of wise men, as in human law and not divine law, right?
Yeah, and these wise men, many of them were Jesuits.
Yeah,
Many of
and
them-
Masons who
many
are
of them
pawns
were-
of the Jesuits, right?
or Masons, Jesuit pawns.
Yeah. And there's a lot of things that are borrowed in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence that comes from Masonic Jesuit literature, which is not a good thing, people. Okay.
Well, and actually, the prime a lot of the American Constitution draws a lot of its inspiration not just from Masonic literature, but also from the Constitution of the Old Republic of Rome.
Yep, and also it has Greek philosophy in it also, which is not good. But anyways, so I think. Go ahead.
And I was like, so yeah.
It's not the godsend that a lot of people try to make it out to be. All right.
So on that cheerful note, let's get back to Maccabees.
Yeah. I think that's enough on that little sidetrack. Sorry, guys. Anyways, it came up, so it was important to kind of talk about it, right?
Yep.
So I actually forget what verse we're on, but here let me pause for
I
one.
shed blood on every side of the sanctuary and defiled it. Verse 30,
Which verse?
verse 37.
Okay, but let's pause for just 1 second though.
Okay.